do is I'll walk you through a couple of slides that I think are really important to get people caught up on what is AI. Really, where I want to start is a little bit in the history. So the type of AI that we're working with is very specific to a technology called transformers. I'm not going to stay too technical. I'm going to keep it pretty high level, but it's important to know before that there have been machine learning and all these other different strategies of AI. It's not new. The concepts have been around for decades. But literally in 2017, this new strategy or paper was released on transformers, which started to produce the AIs that we're looking at today in terms of ChatGPT or Claude, et cetera. So it's important to know that this is still relatively new in terms of its capabilities. But looking from 2017, not long after that paper was released and the ideation around transformers existed, Google came out with BERT, which honestly was a bit of a fail on their behalf. But again, it was a first kind of draft on that. Not long after, OpenAI came out with GPT-2, which nobody really heard about because it was still early 2019. But really what started to happen was in the launch of 2020, GPT-3, and then in 2022, DALL-E, where people started to see images getting created by AI. Most people didn't really come into the idea of AI until about 2022, which is where Anthropic and GPT kind of came out with their 3.5. And that was the real uptick in about November of 2022. So when you get a sense on where AI really started to hit the ground running was around here where people started to see it in the news. Adoption, I think, was about 1 million people had adopted GPT or tested GPT in a month. It is exponential in terms of its use cases. But that's really where people started to see this new opportunity around AI. And then since then, what's really interesting is the cadence. So again, a few years between major milestones, but now we're seeing milestones every 3 to 6 months where there's big releases between Google, who's now entered in with Gemini with this big 2 million context window. We'll explain that. But then you've got Anthropic, you've got OpenAI, you've got open source versions, you've got mini versions that you can run on your own computer, and it's really just blown up and it's taken on multimodals, which means that it can deal with text, which we're obviously going to talk a lot about, but it can now deal with images, it can now deal with audio, it can now deal with video. So now it can take in all this different media types, which is really showing its expansion. So as it learns from different media types, it's now able to create different media types. And this is, again, very recent in terms of some of their capabilities, but really showing that this is an upward curve going like, I guess the screen goes like this for you guys, but showing that it's exponentially increasing at phenomenal speeds. So it's a really good time to take a step back and realize that this isn't new in terms of the idea of AI and machine learning. Have been around for quite a bit of time, but really in the last 3 to 4 years, it has really transformed the way we're working with these new technologies. So what is AI? Simple definition, AI is there to simulate human thinking and intelligence. It's not human thinking and intelligence, it's there to simulate it, which is, I think, a big difference of what people sometimes think. How does it work? Don't worry about reading the text. I'll walk you through it really easily. There's three major components to it. One is the fact that you have what's called an LLM, which is a large language model, which is based on these transformers. So the best way that I've heard it explained to me was um, think of it as you have the internet of data. And if you want to put that on a USB stick, it's never going to happen. So what a transformer is it understands the relationship between elements. So it's predictive. If I say the word Albert, it's going to run through a whole bunch of last names because it knows the first Albert is a first name, and it's going to start running through a bunch of last names that it thinks is the most correct one. So it's going to predict 100 different last names. I'm going to then write Einstein, or I'm going to write the letter E. It's going to go, okay, this person's talking about Albert Einstein because it knows the relationship between these two words. And then once it knows Albert Einstein, it also has an understanding of all the things that correlate around that human being, events, etc. So when I write date of birth, it knows the correlation of those words. It's not that it has a data element that says Albert Einstein was born in this year. It's that there's a relationship that it understands between the words Albert, Einstein, year, and birth. And that power of connection of words allows it to predict the year that he was born because it's a relationship that the data understands, not the actual data itself. When you elevate that, it's then about it understands concepts, it understands events, and it understands those relationships. So I'm going to really simplify this for you. You're a chef. You've read a ton of books about cooking. You know every ingredient imaginable. You know how these ingredients work together. You know how they don't work together. So when someone says, make me a dish, they might ask a few questions on what you like and what your personal taste preference are. But the fact that the chef knows all this stuff intuitively comes from the training of understanding the relationship between all of the elements it knows, whether that's the kitchen or whether that's the ingredients. It's that bed of knowledge. It's not that each of these pieces of data exist and it knows every single recipe in the world. But if you asked it to cook up a great pasta meal or add some protein to that, it would have a really good idea of what to predict would be the right ones to use because it has experience. It understands the connection between all of these different objects. So that's really what an LLM does. It's not about the data itself, it's about understanding the network of data elements and their relationships. So hopefully that does help a fair bit in terms of the concept. Now, there are a few pieces to know. Some people are like, I have AI, and it isn't. It's probably using an AI source like OpenAI, which are these large language models. So when you see a lot of products out there using AI, they're simply creating a GUI or a front end, and then they're going through and passing content to those LLMs to get back information. So the LLM is part of that conversation. And there are three major ones, and then some people have done self-hosting ones where they can then customize it. The other one is modality. And modality is really about the different types of communication. So again, text, video, and images. And the third part is around customization. So this is where you get into, I have an LLM, but I'm going to now create a prompt, some content, but I'm going to give it data that I want it to know. So I'm going to upload a template. I'm going to say, I'm going to give it context. Here is a data set of car inventories. All of that's going to help it when it starts to send that information to the LLM, because the more words you give it, the better it understands those associations and topics. Hopefully that helps a lot. It gives a general sense on what AI is and some of the underlining parts of what develop a lot of these AI agents.